This is Between Sundays, and today I have a topic for you that we all must face. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter your status in life, doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have, none of that matters. Because last Friday on February 20th, I went to my uncle's funeral. In fact, I did the eulogy for him. I pastored for 12 years, and so I have experience doing this kind of thing. And my uncle was not a church-going man by and large. And my cousins, his sons, the churches they go to, if they go, I'm not super acquainted with my cousins these days, but their pastors did not know my uncle. And so the family asked me if I would deliver the eulogy, and of course I was honored and happy to do that for my family and serve them during this time of grief. Funerals, I dislike them for obvious reasons. I'm pretty sure that all of mankind has this in common. Nobody likes funerals because a funeral means somebody that you love and that you care about has died. They're no longer here. They're no longer on this earth, and you now have to live the rest of your life with just a memory. I mean, that person, I suppose, will always be in your heart, and they will always be in your mind, and they will live on in your memories, and you get to see them in photos and remember them as you choose to remember them. But there's no more visits. There's no more phone calls. There's no more texts. There's no more, FaceTimes, or there's none of that. They've come to a permanent end on planet Earth. And so everybody dislikes funerals. But I have grown to dislike the way we practice funerals here in the United States. I dislike it very, very much. We have turned, I cannot remember a funeral in recent memory. And like I said, I pastored for 12 years. And so I'm very well acquainted with funerals. But I cannot remember a funeral in recent memory of someone that I knew or just heard of in passing and talking with friends and somebody they know, so on and so forth, where there was not going to be a quote-unquote celebration of life. And I understand. Why people do that. Because it's much more fun. It's much easier. We're going to celebrate the life this person had. But in my humble opinion, when we do that, we're destroying the purpose of a funeral. Solomon, in the book of Ecclesiastes, he says, "It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth." That's very instructive. It is better for us to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of mirth. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. We take funerals and we try and eliminate as best as we can. Look, it's impossible, but we try to eliminate as much pain as we can. Nobody likes to hurt, I understand. Nobody likes pain. Nobody likes suffering. Nobody likes depressing things. We want joy and happiness and laughter. And there's a time for that. But when somebody passes away, you should not try and cover up the pain. Don't mask it with joy and happiness and celebration of life. I mean, the funerals are for a purpose. Funerals, as much as I dislike them in general like everybody else because somebody's died and it's hard and it's sad. I dislike them on a second hand reason for which I already said, the celebration of life instead of having the funeral. But you see, a real funeral, a real funeral puts things in perspective. See what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 7 at the beginning of the chapter. Why was it better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting? He said, because, quote, that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. That's why we go. That is what a funeral is for. Funerals are not to celebrate life. Funerals are not for happy times. They're not for laughter and joy and mirth and saying hi to family and seeing people you haven't seen in forever. You will do those things typically after the service is concluded. But, the way we practice it, we do not push people to face their own mortality, and we should. We should. That is the instructive purpose of a funeral, is to have the living face their own finite existence. I mean, you've heard the sayings like nobody on their deathbed says, I wish I'd spent more time at the office. Nobody says, I'd wish I'd put in more hours. Nobody says on their deathbed, I wish I'd had more money. Or, what do people regret at the end of their life? They regret not spending more time with their wife or their husband or their children. They regret neglecting their relationship with God, right? If they weren't in tune with Him, if they didn't spend enough time developing a spiritual relationship with the Lord, their Creator, with Jesus Christ. Excuse me while I take a sip of coffee. Funerals put things in perspective. They have that, they pierce our perceived reality. We create false reality most of the time. I try not to live there. Everybody's guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. But we funerals have that way of reminding us of what is important. And the truth is that most of the things that we think are important aren't. Right? I get it. Everybody wants to make a good living. Everybody wants to be well cared for financially. And so you work and you work and you work hard, and you should work hard. But when the time comes for you to be put in a pine box, whether you made $150,000 a year or $60,000 a year, really doesn't matter that much. Or in fact, doesn't matter at all. There's an old saying that at the end of a game of chess, the king and the pawn go in the same box. When it's time for you to be buried, doesn't matter how many Instagram followers you had, how big of a business you were the CEO of, whether you had one employee or 500 or 5,000, doesn't matter. Whether you paid off your mortgage early, something I'd like to do, something my wife and I talk about. Whether you paid off your mortgage early or you paid it off on time or you paid it off late. When you die, doesn't matter. Whether you were swallowed up in debt or you live debt free, listen, and during life, there's a way to handle it. And it's much better to live debt free because the borrower is servant to the lender. But when you die, doesn't matter. We stress out about all of these things. How successful we are, however we want to define success, how much money we have, how big is our house, how much debt do we have, are we doing this right, are we doing that right? None of it matters. Not when you die. The only thing that matters when you die is what comes next. Right? That is literally all that matters. It is appointed unto man once to die, but after this, the judgment. Now, I don't know who you are listening to this podcast. I don't know what your religious background is. I don't know what your spiritual inclinations are, what you believe or what you don't believe, but I am a Christian. After this, the judgment. Death is not the judgment. Death is just the beginning. Death is the death is the end of the beginning. Winston Churchill said, I think in a speech to the House of Commons in World War I think he said, this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. When we leave this world, this is just the end of the beginning. There is, I believe, an eternity left for the soul. You are not a body. You are a soul inside of a body, and that soul will exist forever somewhere. So the only thing that matters at death is, what is your relationship like with God through the person of Jesus Christ? And listen, this is not an evangelistic podcast episode. I may do that in the future. But that is going to be the only thing that matters. And a few other things that matter on a little bit of a lesser scale is the relationships you had with your people, with your wife, with your husband, with your children, with your father, with your mother. Those things are what matter. Look, if you've got difficult relationships, if there's a schism between you and your father or your mother or your brothers or your sisters or your sons or daughters, whatever that relationship is, and get it settled. Honestly, swallow the pride, forgive the wrongdoing. That person may be wrong, you may be wrong. Honestly, who cares? And listen, I'm a big proponent of recognizing truth and what is right and what is wrong. However, if there is a schism between you and somebody you love, imagine that person dying. Imagine them dying. You can never make it right. You can forgive that person, but you will never be able to forgive them and let them know that you forgave them and restore a relationship. It's just sad. I've seen it. And then there is regret, and there's an empty spot in the soul that you will have a very difficult time filling. Final perspective. Number one, what's your relationship with God? Number two, the relationship you have with your people. Number three, final perspective, you never have as much time as you think you do. My uncle was 72. He wasn't a young man, but he wasn't, he wasn't super old. The older I get, the more my definition of old changes. You never have as much time as you think. You have no idea what today's going to bring to you. So, thanks for listening. Take care of your relationship with God. Take care of your relationship with your people. And do it post haste, because you never have as much time as you think. This has been Between Sundays. We'll be back soon.